Some women don't reach back when a man leans in. They do not chase, do not plead, do not perform softness on command. Their silence isn't coldness, it's power wrapped in stillness. He meets her, and something ancient stirs. Not because she gives him warmth, but because she withholds it. Her distance mirrors a sacred mystery he cannot name, and that mystery ignites an obsession that feels almost divine. In Jungian terms, he isn't falling for her, he's falling for the echo of his anima, the hidden feminine within his psyche. The woman before him becomes a projection screen for everything he has disowned: tenderness, vulnerability, intuition, depth. He mistakes this mirror for a miracle, believing she carries what he's missing. But she does not give. She reveals. And that revelation is unbearable. Her emotional unavailability becomes the terrain where his shadow wrestles with its own hunger. Because what he truly desires isn't her love, it's his own lost wholeness. He will call it passion. He will call it chemistry. But what he truly feels is recognition, a haunting sense that she holds the missing piece of his soul. And yet she never does. She is the embodiment of what he refuses to face, the parts of himself he abandoned long ago in the name of control, pride, and ego. In her silence, he hears the voice of his own disconnection. In her absence, he feels the weight of all the moments he abandoned his inner world. And in her unavailability, he meets the exact reflection of his own emotional distance, the distance he built from himself. This is not a love story. It's a mirror. And mirrors are merciless when a man hasn't yet met his soul. There is a pattern older than language, the eternal dance between the man who chases what he cannot possess and the woman who carries the quiet weight of her own mystery. He doesn't understand why she consumes his thoughts. He can be surrounded by noise, by the chaos of the world, by adoration from others, yet she is the silence behind it all. She is the pause between his achievements, the question behind every victory. What draws him is not her beauty, nor her charm, nor even her presence. It's her distance, the sacred refusal to be owned. In Jungian psychology, this is where the anima projection takes root. The emotionally unavailable woman becomes an archetype, the vessel through which his unconscious attempts to reconcile its own imbalance. He projects his inner feminine, the lost parts of tenderness and vulnerability, onto her. He believes he loves her, but he is falling into the reflection of his own soul. The irony is tragic. He desires emotional intimacy most from those who do not offer it, because on a deeper level he does not yet know how to receive it. His own heart is barricaded by the fear of being seen, fully, painfully, truthfully. So he becomes addicted to the chase. Not because he enjoys the struggle, but because the struggle feels like home. The tension mirrors his internal war between longing and fear, desire and avoidance. Every unanswered message, every quiet withdrawal, every moment she seems untouched, these become sacred rituals in his obsession. She becomes a myth he must solve, not a woman he must understand. And in this pursuit, he becomes enslaved by his own projection. He tells himself she is different, special, unlike anyone else. And in a way, she is, but not for the reasons he imagines. She has simply learned the art of emotional detachment. Not out of cruelty, but out of survival. You see, the emotionally unavailable woman wasn't born cold. She was made cold. The fire inside her burned too brightly once. It lit up every room. It healed every wound but her own. Until one day she realized her warmth was being consumed by those who mistook her light for fuel. So she learned to guard her energy, to choose silence over explanation, to let her absence speak louder than her effort. When she stopped offering softness to those who only wanted to taste it, she became powerful. But that power didn't come without a price. Men began to crave her not because she was loving, but because she was contained. She embodied the divine feminine restrained, and that restraint became magnetic. Because in a world of overexposure and emotional chaos, her self-possession was rare. She became the archetype of the unattainable feminine, the modern echo of Jung's anima figure, the goddess veiled in distance. And the man? He could not stop circling her gravity. For in her silence, he confronted every part of himself that feared being unloved. He mistook that confrontation for attraction. But what he truly wanted was relief, the relief of no longer feeling the emptiness inside him. He wanted her to make him whole. And she, in her knowing silence, refused. There comes a moment in every man's pursuit when the silence stops feeling alluring and starts feeling unbearable. When the distance he once romanticized becomes a mirror too honest to look into. When her calm, her quiet detachment, begins to feel like judgment. At first, he mistakes it for a challenge. If she does not respond, he'll try harder. If she seems unmoved, he'll make her see him. He tells himself he is proving his worth. But slowly, something begins to crack. Jung would call this the confrontation with the shadow. The moment when the man realizes that what he's chasing outside of himself is what he has denied within. Her silence becomes unbearable because it reveals his dependency on noise. Her mystery frustrates him because it exposes how little he truly knows himself. Her distance wounds him because it shows him how deeply he fears abandonment. She holds no weapon. She raises no voice. Yet her absence dismantles his entire self-concept. Every projection he cast upon her, the fantasy of the ideal woman, the mother figure, the healer, the savior, begins to dissolve under the weight of her indifference. He can no longer confuse control with love. Her unavailability reflects his own emotional exile. In the quiet aftermath of her withdrawal, he begins to meet himself for the first time. Not the confident man he shows the world, but the boy who once learned that affection must be earned, that love requires performance, that closeness is dangerous. He begins to feel the grief he's been avoiding for years. The grief that tells him he never truly knew intimacy, only the performance of it. And that is the paradox of the emotionally unavailable woman. She is not his punishment. She is his mirror. Through her distance, she draws him into his own shadow, the realm of his forgotten tenderness, his suppressed vulnerability, his longing to be seen without the armor. Every unanswered call, every ignored attempt, every silent night becomes sacred in hindsight, because it breaks his illusion that love can be conquered. Love cannot be conquered. It can only be met, mirrored, and surrendered to. The man who once tried to possess her now faces his own emptiness. And for the first time, he realizes he was never chasing her. He was running from himself. Her silence was not cruelty. It was initiation. In that absence, his ego begins to crumble. And from its ruins, something more authentic stirs. The beginning of awareness. The whisper of humility. The faint pulse of real connection. He starts to see her not as the one who wounded him, but as the one who revealed his wound. And that realization, painful, quiet, liberating, marks the beginning of his inner transformation. Because when a man finally faces his shadow, the woman who mirrored it ceases to haunt him. She becomes his teacher. She didn't plan to become distant. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't punishment. It was simply the inevitable stillness that follows the exhaustion of overgiving. For years, she had poured her energy into understanding others, their moods, their wounds, their silences. She had mistaken empathy for love and healing for connection. Every time a man withdrew, she tried harder. Every time affection faded, she compensated with softness. Until one day, something in her spirit snapped, not with rage, but with revelation. She realized she was not born to be a reflection of anyone's emptiness. She was not a vessel for someone else's healing. She was not a mirror for validation. She was a mirror for truth. In Jungian language, this was her individuation, the process of integrating the fragmented pieces of her feminine psyche. The maiden within her, who once sought approval through sweetness, met the wise woman, the archetype of detachment, who understands that silence can speak more powerfully than words ever could. When a woman reaches this stage, her energy changes. Not visibly, she still smiles, still moves with grace, but there is something quieter behind her eyes, a knowing that cannot be seduced by flattery or urgency. She becomes the contained feminine, the embodiment of what Jung called the self, whole, balanced, and inwardly anchored. Men sense it instantly. Her silence is not cold, it is sacred. It tells him, I no longer need you to recognize my worth, I have already met it within myself. The shift is subtle but seismic. Where once she reacted, she now observes. Where once she feared loss, she now understands impermanence. Where once she sought reassurance, she now offers presence, not as a plea, but as a gift. And it is this calm, this effortless self-possession, that becomes irresistible. Because in a world addicted to validation, a woman who no longer seeks it becomes magnetic. She no longer explains her boundaries, she lives them. She no longer chases clarity, she embodies it. She no longer seeks to be understood, she understands herself. It is not arrogance, it is alignment. She has become aware of the unconscious roles she once played. The caretaker, the pleaser, the empath, the savior. She integrates them, thanks them, and releases them. This is what Jung meant by the union of opposites. The light of her empathy now coexists with the shadow of her boundaries. Her softness is no longer submission, it is discernment. Her strength is no longer hardness, it is sovereignty. And as she moves through the world in this energy, she no longer attracts chaos, she mirrors it back. She no longer chases connection, she magnetizes it. For she has stepped out of the cycle of projection, out of the polarity of craving and withholding. She has become what the mystics call whole. And in this wholeness, she becomes untouchable, not because she is above love, but because she has learned that love cannot thrive where self-betrayal exists. At first, he thought she was simply pulling away. He mistook her silence for disinterest, her distance for rejection. He told himself she must have found someone else, someone who could hold her attention longer than he could hold his own reflection. But time has a strange way of revealing truth. Days stretched into nights, and her absence, once just an inconvenience, became a mirror. In that mirror, he began to see the man he had been running from. He saw the part of himself that confused attention with affection. The part that wanted to possess beauty rather than understand it. The part that feared vulnerability and called it strength. He remembered her gaze, not the way it looked, but the way it saw. She had always looked at him like she could see beyond the mask, beyond his words, beyond his armor. And now, that gaze haunted him, because she wasn't there to see anymore. And yet, her absence made him see himself. This is the paradox Jung spoke of, the anima's withdrawal. When the feminine energy, once externalized in a woman, returns to its source within the man, he begins to awaken. Her silence was not punishment, it was initiation. It stripped away the noise, forcing him into the solitude he had always avoided. In that silence, he met his shadow, the jealousy, the fear, the need for control. And beneath that darkness, something softer emerged. The boy who once longed to be loved, but never learned how to receive it. This is how the masculine begins to heal, not through pursuit, but through surrender. Through the slow, painful acknowledgement that love cannot be conquered. It can only be met. He begins to understand what she had known all along. That connection cannot bloom without self-awareness. That desire, without consciousness, devours itself. That obsession, without reflection, is just the ego begging not to be forgotten. In his dreams, he sees her, not as a lover, but as an archetype. She stands at the edge of a quiet lake, draped in light, untouchable yet tender. She does not turn toward him, she doesn't need to. Because she is not his to possess, she is the reflection of his own lost soul. He realizes then that she was never the one who disappeared. He was. She simply stopped holding up the mirror. And in doing so, she gave him the chance to find himself again. The awakening comes not in a moment of clarity, but in the ache of recognition. He begins to listen more deeply, not to the words of others, but to the quiet voice inside his own chest. He learns that true power is not dominance, but presence. That true masculinity is not control, but awareness. That love, in its purest form, demands that both the masculine and feminine stand whole within themselves, not halves seeking completion, but mirrors reflecting divinity. And somewhere in the silence between them, their souls meet again, not as lovers, but as equals walking their separate paths toward wholeness. The woman who walks away in silence isn't weak. She simply sees more. Because she has become the mirror he can no longer shatter. And he, if he's brave enough, will one day thank her for teaching him the one truth no obsession can touch. That love is not found in the chase. It's found in the awakening. Some souls meet not to stay, but to awaken. He thought she left because she stopped caring. But she left because she finally saw. And when a woman truly sees, not the mask, not the promise, but the truth behind a man's desire, she can no longer play small. Her silence became his teacher. Her distance became his mirror. And her absence became his initiation into wholeness. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that's what she was. His fate disguised as reflection. The mirror that shattered his illusions, so he could finally face himself. For the feminine, this is the art of sacred detachment. To love without losing herself. To feel deeply but not drown. To walk away not out of bitterness, but out of vision. Because she no longer needs to be chosen to know her worth. She is the choice. The one who awakens the masculine not through words, but through the quiet power of becoming whole. And somewhere in the silence he finally understands. She didn't reject him. She reflected him. Until the reflection became too real to ignore. The woman who walks away in silence isn't weak, she simply sees more.